Hello, I'm Hope Logan. I am an actor on Bold and the Beautiful, and many people really love both me and our Bold and the Beautiful drama. So I've come here to share updates about my beloved Bold and the Beautiful. Everyone, please subscribe and support me. If you do, I will keep coming every day with new updates for you. The week ahead on The Bold and the Beautiful unfolds with an undercurrent of tension that slowly tightens its grip, pulling every character into a storm of shifting priorities, fragile alliances, and unsettling mysteries. At Forrester Creations, the air feels heavier than usual, as if something unspoken lingers just beneath the surface. It begins with Steffi Forrester Finnegan delivering news that lands with quiet force, urging Hope Logan Spencer to reconsider where their focus truly belongs. There's a firmness in Steffi's tone, a sense of urgency that leaves little room for compromise, and Hope can already feel what's coming before the words are fully spoken. When she responds, suggesting that hope for the future is being pushed aside in favor of couture, there's a flicker of frustration in her voice, one born from a history of uncertainty and repeated setbacks. Steffi, however, stands her ground, reminding Hope that this is a business and survival depends on prioritizing what consistently succeeds, even if it comes at the cost of something more personal. As the conversation lingers, the emotional divide between them becomes impossible to ignore, widening with every passing second. Couture has always been the crown jewel of Forrester Creations, a reliable triumph that brings prestige and profit. While hope for the future exists in a far more fragile space, its success never quite guaranteed. Hope feels that imbalance deeply, carrying the weight of every past disappointment, every moment where her line seemed like an afterthought rather than a priority. Her passion remains unwavering, but so does her fear that it will never truly be given the chance to thrive. The uncertainty gnaws at her, planting seeds of doubt that begin to stretch beyond the walls of Forrester itself. And as Steffi walks away confident in her decision, Hope is left standing in the aftermath, caught between loyalty and the quiet, growing realization that she may need to forge a different path altogether. That sense of unease softens, at least on the surface, as the scene shifts into something warmer, more intimate, a celebratory dinner bringing together Hope, Liam Spencer, Katie Logan Spencer, and Bill Spencer. The atmosphere is filled with laughter and the gentle glow of shared success, a rare moment where tensions seem to dissolve into something almost peaceful. Glasses clink, smiles are exchanged, and for a brief stretch of time, it feels like everything might actually be okay. Yet beneath that warmth, there's an undercurrent of contemplation, particularly in Katie's eyes, as she watches the others with quiet thoughtfulness. When she finally speaks, her question cuts through the celebration with surprising clarity, gently but firmly steering the conversation toward the future. Eric's designs may have been beautiful, she acknowledges, but they represent only a single chapter, leaving everyone to wonder what comes next. The question lingers in the air long after it's asked, shifting the tone of the evening in subtle but undeniable ways. Hope, already wrestling with her frustrations at Forrester, can't help but feel the weight of it more than anyone else. Katie's words aren't just a reflection, they're an invitation, a possibility waiting to be explored. There's a sense that both Katie and Bill might be preparing to offer Hope something more stable, something that values her vision without hesitation or compromise. The idea of leaving Forrester Creations begins to take shape, not as a sudden decision, but as a quiet, persistent thought that refuses to fade. And as the dinner continues, the warmth remains, but it's now laced with anticipation, as if everyone can feel that a turning point is approaching, even if no one has fully said it out loud. But just as the emotional stakes begin to settle into something contemplative, the story takes a sharp and chilling turn, pulling the audience into a moment of pure suspense. Back at Forrester Creations, long after the building should have fallen silent, Dylan finds herself alone, the stillness around her broken only by an unexpected noise. The sound echoes faintly through the space, just enough to make her pause, her instincts immediately on edge. She calls out cautiously, her voice carrying through the quiet as she wonders if it might be Jamie, another employee lingering late. But there's no answer, only the unsettling sense that she's not as alone as she thought. The tension builds slowly, each second stretching longer than the last, as Dylan moves carefully through the dimly lit room. Shadows seem to shift where they shouldn't, and her unease grows stronger with every step. Then, just as her nerves begin to tighten to a breaking point, something moves, a figure concealed behind a rack of dresses, suddenly stepping into view. The moment hits with explosive force, shattering the silence as Dylan lets out a terrified scream, the shock overwhelming her completely. Whoever stands before her has clearly been waiting, lurking in the darkness with intention, turning a quiet night into something far more sinister. The mystery surrounding the intruder only deepens the fear, raising questions that refuse to settle into easy answers. Some believe it could be Luna Nozawa, somehow alive and seeking revenge after everything that's happened, her return driven by unfinished business and a desire to confront Dylan. But there's another possibility, one that feels just as unsettling in its own way. Remy Price, newly reconnected to the canvas with ties that have yet to be fully revealed, may hold the key to this terrifying encounter. If he shares a hidden past with Dylan, perhaps even as a half-brother, the implications become even more disturbing, especially if their history is marked by manipulation and cruel games. As the pieces begin to fall into place, a darker picture emerges, one where this encounter may not be random at all but carefully orchestrated. If Remy is indeed behind it, his methods suggest something deeply personal, a desire not just to confront Dylan, but to unnerve her completely. The possibility of a disguised voice, a staged phone call, even a mask hiding his identity, adds layers of psychological tension that make the situation all the more chilling. This isn't just a scare, it's a calculated act designed to push Dylan into panic, to force her into a state where fear takes over entirely. And as the preview comes to a close, one thing becomes unmistakably clear. Dylan's world is about to spiral into chaos. The fear she experiences in that moment is only the beginning, a spark that will ignite a far more intense chain of events in the days to come. With relationships shifting, loyalties being tested, and danger creeping ever closer, the week ahead promises a collision of emotion and suspense that no one will escape unscathed. The shock of that moment doesn't simply fade once the scream echoes into silence. It lingers, clinging to Dylan long after the initial terror has passed, like a shadow that refuses to loosen its grip. Her heart pounds violently in her chest as she stumbles backward, trying to make sense of what she's just seen, her breath coming in uneven bursts as fear takes hold of her entire body. The dim lighting of Forrester creations only amplifies the disorientation, turning familiar surroundings into something unrecognizable and threatening. Every detail feels distorted, every movement heightened, as if the world itself has shifted into something darker and far less predictable. Whoever stood behind that rack didn't just want to startle her, they wanted to leave a mark, to carve fear into her memory in a way that wouldn't easily be forgotten. And as Dylan tries to steady herself, it becomes painfully clear that this encounter is not an isolated moment, but the beginning of something far more dangerous. As the reality of what just happened begins to settle in, questions flood her mind with overwhelming intensity, each one more unsettling than the last. Was it truly someone she knows? Someone connected to her past in ways she hasn't fully confronted? Or was it something even more calculated, more deliberate than she can yet comprehend? The possibility of Luna Nozawa refuses to fade entirely, lingering like a ghost of unfinished conflict. But there's something about this moment that feels different, more personal, more intentional. The thought of Remy Price begins to surface with increasing clarity, bringing with it fragments of memory that feel both distant and disturbingly vivid. If he is indeed tied to her past, if their connection runs deeper than anyone realizes, then this encounter carries a weight that goes far beyond a simple scare. It suggests a history filled with unresolved tension, with patterns that may now be repeating in far more dangerous ways. And somewhere within that growing realization lies the most unsettling truth of all, that this may only be the first move in a much larger game. If Remy is behind this, then his intentions are not merely to frighten, but to control the narrative, to dictate the pace of events in a way that keeps Dylan constantly off balance. The idea that he might have used disguises, distorted voices, or carefully staged moments to manipulate her perception adds a chilling psychological edge to everything that's unfolding. It means that nothing can be taken at face value, that every interaction, every sound, every shadow could be part of something orchestrated. The fear becomes more than just immediate. It becomes strategic, something designed to wear her down over time rather than break her all at once. And as Dylan begins to piece these possibilities together, the sense of isolation grows stronger, leaving her uncertain of who she can trust or where she can truly feel safe. At the same time, across town, the emotional ripple effects of earlier decisions continue to unfold in quieter but no less significant ways. Hope finds herself unable to shake the conversation with Steffi, replaying every word, every implication, as the reality of her situation becomes impossible to ignore. What once felt like a temporary setback now begins to resemble a pattern she can no longer accept, a cycle of uncertainty that threatens to undermine everything she has worked for. Katie's question from the dinner echoes in her mind with renewed clarity, no longer just a passing thought, but a challenge that demands an answer. The idea of stepping away from Forrester Creations begins to take on a new level of seriousness, transforming from a distant possibility into a choice she may soon have to make. And with that choice comes the weight of everything it would mean, leaving behind not just a company, but a legacy, a history, and a part of herself. Liam watches this shift in Hope with quiet concern, sensing the internal struggle she's trying to keep hidden beneath the surface. He knows how much hope for the future means to her, how deeply tied it is to her identity, and the thought of her walking away from it carries its own kind of heartbreak. Yet at the same time, he can see the toll that constant uncertainty has taken on her, the way it has slowly chipped away at her confidence and sense of stability. Bill and Katie, meanwhile, seem increasingly aligned in their perspective, recognizing both the potential in Hope and the opportunity that may lie ahead. There's a subtle shift in their energy, a growing sense that they are not just observers in this situation, but active participants preparing to reshape what comes next. And while no formal offer has yet been placed on the table, the intention behind their thoughts feels unmistakable, quietly building towards something that could change everything. But even as these personal and professional crossroads begin to take shape, the shadow hanging over Dylan refuses to loosen its hold, threading its way through the narrative with an intensity that cannot be ignored. The contrast between the warm, contemplative moments shared over dinner and the cold, unsettling fear she experienced at Forrester Creations only heightens the sense that something larger is unfolding beneath the surface. These stories are not separate, they are converging, moving toward a point where decisions, secrets, and hidden connections will collide in ways no one fully anticipates. And at the center of it all stands Dylan, caught in a web of uncertainty that is tightening with every passing moment. As the week presses forward, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The calm is an illusion, a fragile pause before the storm fully breaks. Dylan's fear will not remain contained to a single moment. It will grow, evolve, and force her into a position where she must confront whatever or whoever is targeting her. Hope's uncertainty will demand resolution, pushing her toward a decision that could redefine her future in ways both empowering and irreversible. And the connections between past and present, between hidden truths and present danger, will begin to surface with undeniable force. What started as quiet tension is now building into something far more explosive, promising a week where every choice carries weight, every moment matters, and no one emerges unchanged. As the tension deepens, the lines between fear and reality begin to blur for Dylan in ways she never anticipated, pulling her further into a psychological maze that feels impossible to escape. Sleep becomes elusive, replaced by restless nights where every creak of the floor and whisper of air feels like a threat closing in. The memory of that figure stepping out from behind the rack of dresses replays over and over in her mind, each time more vivid, more terrifying, as if her mind itself is amplifying the horror. Even in daylight, surrounded by the familiar elegance of Forrester Creations, she can't shake the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes tracking her every move. The once comforting rhythm of her daily routine begins to fracture under the weight of that fear, leaving her on edge in ways that others can't help but notice. And yet, when she tries to explain what happened, the words feel insufficient, unable to fully capture the dread that still clings to her. Whispers begin to circulate quietly through the halls, subtle at first, then growing as curiosity and concern intertwine. Some dismiss it as a harmless prank taken too far, while others sense there's something far more serious lurking beneath the surface. Dylan herself can't settle on a single explanation, her instincts pulling her in conflicting directions as she tries to make sense of what she experienced. The idea that this could be someone from her past becomes harder to ignore, especially as small, seemingly insignificant details begin to resurface in her memory. Moments she once brushed aside now take on new meaning, forming a pattern that feels both familiar and deeply unsettling. And as those fragments begin to align, the name Remy Price rises again with an undeniable presence, bringing with it a wave of emotions she thought she had long buried. If Remy is indeed back in her life, then this isn't just coincidence, it's confrontation, long overdue and far more dangerous than she ever imagined. The thought of their shared past, filled with manipulation disguised as mischief, casts a dark shadow over everything unfolding now. What once may have been childish pranks now feels like something far more calculated, evolved into a form of control that borders on obsession. Dylan starts to question whether this moment at Forrester was meant to send a message, a warning that he is closer than she ever realized. The possibility that he could be watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again, sends a chill through her that she can't ignore. And with every passing hour, the sense of urgency grows stronger, pushing her toward a breaking point where she can no longer remain silent. Meanwhile, Hope finds herself standing at a crossroads that feels just as defining, though in a very different way. The doubts planted by Steffi's decision continue to grow, intertwining with Katie's earlier question until they form a single, undeniable truth. Something has to change. She begins to look at her work, her dreams, and her place within Forrester Creations with new eyes, seeing not just the potential, but the limitations that have held her back for so long. The idea of starting fresh, of building something where her vision is fully supported, begins to feel less like a risk and more like a necessity. It's not just about business anymore. It's about reclaiming control over her future, about refusing to let her passion be treated as secondary. And as that realization settles in, it brings with it a quiet but powerful resolve that begins to reshape her outlook entirely. Katie and Bill, ever perceptive, sense this shift almost immediately, recognizing the moment for what it is, a turning point waiting to be seized. Their earlier reflections now take on a more strategic tone, evolving into a conversation about opportunity, growth, and the possibility of something new. There's a subtle but unmistakable sense that they are preparing to extend an offer, one that could give Hope the stability and creative freedom she has long been denied. It's not presented as pressure, but as possibility, an open door rather than a forced path. And yet, the weight of that possibility is undeniable, carrying with it the promise of change and the risk that comes with stepping into the unknown. For Hope, the decision looms larger with every passing moment, its impact stretching far beyond her own ambitions and into the lives of those around her. Back at Forrester, the tension surrounding Dylan reaches a boiling point as the sense of being watched transforms into something far more tangible. Another unexplained moment, another flicker of movement where there should be none, pushes her closer to the edge, forcing her to confront the reality that this is not going to stop on its own. The fear that once paralyzed her begins to shift into something else, determination, fragile but growing, fueled by the need to reclaim her sense of safety. She realizes that running from this will only give whoever is behind it more power, more control over her life. And so, despite the fear that still lingers in every corner of her mind, she begins to consider the possibility of facing it head-on, of uncovering the truth no matter how difficult or dangerous it may be. As all these threads continue to tighten, the story moves steadily toward an inevitable collision, where personal decisions and hidden dangers will intersect in ways no one can fully predict. Dylan's fight to understand what's happening to her is no longer just about fear. It's about survival, about taking back control from someone who seems determined to take it away. Hope's journey, meanwhile, becomes a powerful exploration of identity and independence, a decision that could redefine not only her career, but her sense of self. And woven through it all is the quiet but growing sense that these stories are not unfolding in isolation, that the choices being made now will ripple outward, affecting everyone connected to them. By the time the week reaches its peak, the emotional and psychological stakes have risen to a level that can no longer be ignored. Dylan stands on the brink of uncovering a truth that could change everything, even as the danger surrounding her intensifies with each passing moment.